This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening everyone. Baruch Hamaboim. Welcome to the last year of Tafshin Pei. Actually, this year is going to be two parts. So we're going to do part two, Bez Hashem, tomorrow night. We'll do it through Zoom at 9 p.m. But let's start the sugya, a very relevant topic. This year we have a unique phenomenon, and of course we know Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos. Actually, it could be quite a common phenomenon. You could have a cluster of years. You could have like 4 or 5 years, and most of them Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos. But interestingly, the last time this happened was 11 years ago. So it's been a while. And I finally realized, because the last time I gave a shiur on Rosh Hashanah that came out on Shabbos was pre-recorded. So I was like looking back, what did I say on Rosh Hashanah that came out on Shabbos? I couldn't find it. It was before they invented cameras. Really. So there's no record. There's no record of anything ever said on Rosh Hashanah that came out on Shabbos. What? I said it. The Aruch HaNer was before 11 years ago, but it was not recorded. So, but this is a new subject, a very interesting topic, a very controversial topic. One of the most fascinating controversies that occurred really in the last 100 years or 150 years. But let's start with the Lamdus, and then the second half of the shiur we'll get into the situation that occurred. The Mishnah tells us at the end of Masechta Rosh Hashanah, Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah shechal liyos b'Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, b'mikdash hayu toiken. In the Beis HaMikdash they would blow shofar. Aval loy b'Medina, but not in the Medina. So now the question is, what is the Medina? And that is going to be a subject of great dispute. What does Medina mean? Does Medina mean outside of Yerushalayim? Does Medina mean outside of the Mikdash? Does Medina mean outside of Eretz Yisrael? All the Mishnah says is they blew in the Mikdash, they did not blow in the Medina. Mishacharav Beis HaMikdash, once the temple was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Sheyu Toikin B'chol Makom. Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was masakin to blow shofar everywhere sheyesh by bezdin, wherever there's a bezdin. Presumably his takana, like many of his takanas, were zecher lemikdash. Any place we have a bezdin, whether you go to Queens, whether you go to Flatbush, Borough Park, wherever there's a bezdin, you blow shofar. On Shabbos, you're talking? On Shabbos, during when on a regular year, you blow shofar everywhere. In every shul, you blow shofar. The chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, he was masakin. Wherever there's a bezdin, you blow shofar. Amar Rabbi Lazar, no. Lo hiskin Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai elo b'Yavne b'lvad. Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was only masakin in Yavne, but nowhere else. The other Batei Mikdashim did not parallel Yavne. They did not come close to Yavne, and therefore the Takana Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was only in Yavne. Amrulai, the rabbi said, the Chachamim said, Echad Yavne ve'echad kol makom sheyesh boi bezdin. That Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was masakin, both Yavne or any bezdin. The Lakewood bezdin, the Flatbush bezdin, any bezdin, you name it, the bezdin that gives a hechsher on your chewing gum, wherever there's a bezdin, you could blow shofar and Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, and that's what we paskin. That once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was masakin that you blow shofar everywhere. Now, here's $1 million question. The question is, why do we not blow shofar when Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos? So we're all familiar with one approach to this question, and that's the approach of the Bavli. But the Yerushalmi has a completely different take on this. The Yerushalmi, now it's a good idea once in a while to read a Yerushalmi. Look at this Yerushalmi. Rav Abba bar Papa Amar Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rabbi Yochanan Rishon ben Lakish having Yasivin. Rabbi Yochanan and Rishon Lakish were sitting. Now, whenever Rabbi Yochanan and Rishon Lakish were sitting, you know they're up to good stuff, right, Bari? Mm-hmm. So, have a Makshi. They were asking questions to each other. Amrin, they said, Tanina Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah b'Shabbos. When Yom Tov comes out on Shabbos, b'Mikdash hayu toiken avaloi b'Medina, they would blow in the Beis HaMikdash, not in the Medina. Frek the Yerushalmi a memanav shach. In Dvar Torah, in means if, in the Yerushalmi. If it's Midairaisa, that you blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos, ach b'gvulin yidcha, then you should blow shofar anywhere on Shabbos. In Lesu Dvar Torah, if it's not Midairaisa that you're not to blow shofar, in other words, let's say it's some kind of rabbinic, injunction against blowing the shofar, then after Mikdash lo yidcha, right? In other words, excuse me, if midairaisa you have to blow the shofar on Shabbos, then you should blow even in outside of the Beis Hamikdash. If it's not midairaisa that you blow the shofar on Shabbos, then you shouldn't blow in the Mikdash. Mimanav shach. Are you supposed to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos or not? If you are, blow it in Chutz La'aretz. If you're not, don't blow it in the Mikdash. So what happened? Says the Gemara, says the Yushalmi, Avar Kahana. Kahana was passing by. That means that's Rav Kahana to you. Okay? Amran, they said, Hagav Rava, here's a big guy, here's an important person, let's ask him. Osan Sha'alan, so they went and they asked him. Amar Alon, he said to them, I'll tell you why you don't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos. One pasuk says it should be a day of Trua. One pasuk says you don't blow, but you talk about the shofar. When Rosh Hashanah comes out on a weekday, Yom Trua, you blow the shofar. When Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, Zichron Trua, you just talk about the shofar. Mazkirin avaloy taikin. Meaning, says Rav Kahana, we don't blow shofar on Shabbos midoiraisa. Which pasuk? Zichron Trua. Zichron Trua says you don't blow the shofar, you talk about the shofar. Good for them. I don't think, no, it says like that. Vatitem lanu Hashem Elokeinu b'ahava es yoim hazikaron hazeh. Yoim Zichron Trua. Now, it doesn't always say Zichron Trua. It only says Zichron Trua on Shabbos.
Well, it shouldn't say Yom. It should say.
You mean you shouldn't say Zichron Trua? 1 second.
Yes, but you shouldn't say Yom.
Wow, what's right? It is a Yom.
Yeah, but it's not the Zich. It's either Zichron.
We'll see.
Or Yom.
We'll see. It's definitely a Yom. The day is the day.
The Yom goes on the Teruah, on the blow.
It's a Yom, perhaps Zichron Trua, but we'll see.
Why isn't it the other way around, though?
When Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, it's Zichron Trua. And when Rosh Hashanah comes out on the week, it's Yom Trua. You actually blow.
Why isn't it the other way around? Yom Trua could be Shabbos and Zichron Trua could be the week.
You tell me. If you have one time that you shouldn't blow, one time you should blow, you have to use your common sense, right? Rav Miller used to say, the Gemara says, why do I need a pasuk? It's a svara. So Miller asked, what do you mean, why do I need a pasuk? It's a svara. A pasuk is better than a svara? No. If you have a svara yeshara, that's midaraisa, just like a pasuk. So svara yeshara says, if one pasuk says don't blow, one pasuk says blow, so then the pasuk that says don't blow is talking about on Shabbos. Fine. So right now, according to Yushalmi, you don't blow shofar on Shabbos, midaraisa, zichron trua. The Yushalmi continues, Rab Ze'ira mifakid l'chavraya. Rab Ze'ira would command his friends, go and listen to the drashas of Rab Levi. Because whenever Rab Levi would give a drasha, you would always hear something new. So they went to Rab Levi's drasha. And he said as follows. One pasuk says Yom Trua. One pasuk says Zichron Trua. How? If it falls out on Shabbos, Zichron Trua. If it falls out during the week, Yom Trua. Yushalmi a pashat kasha. If you have exeris hakasav of Zichron Trua, then you're not allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbos. Why do you blow the shofar in the Beis Hamikdash? Me'ata af b'mikdash lo yircha. You shouldn't blow in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Yushalmi says like this. The pasuk says by blowing the shofar be'echad lachodesh, which means whenever you know exactly when Rosh Hashanah is, you blow on Shabbos. And where did they know exactly when Rosh Hashanah is? In the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, in the Mikdash, they would blow on Shabbos. So ask the Yushalmi, so then they should blow on Shabbos. In any reputable Bezdin where they know exactly when the first day of Rosh Hashanah is. So the Yushalmi concludes, the Rajbi says that the end of the pasuk is v'hikravtem, from which we derive. Wherever you bring karbanos, you blow the shofar on Shabbos. Wherever you don't bring karbanos, you do not blow the shofar on Shabbos. The bottom line is, according to Yushalmi, during the week, Avada, you blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. On Shabbos, you don't. Why not? Midoiraisa. Which pasuk? Zichron Trua. Why do you do it in the Beis Hamikdash? Also, Gzeras HaKosov, Be'echad Lachodesh V'Hikravtem. And L'chayra, according to the Yishalmi, that would explain the Nusach HaTfilah, that this year on Rosh Hashanah, you're going to say, Vatita Lana Hashem going to be Ava, Es Yoim Hazikarin Hazeh, Zichroin Trua, or Yoim Zichroin Trua. The Nusach of Zichroin Trua seems to be going according to the Yishalmi. So you mean, what is the Isser of blowing? Yeah. Yishalmi doesn't tell us. Apparently, there must be some Isser Doiraisa blowing, maybe using an instrument. Now the truth is, there's no Isser Doiraisa to blow an instrument on Shabbos. The same way there's no Isser Doiraisa to dance on Shabbos. Both are an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's the same Mishnah. You can't dance, and you can't blow an instrument. So why the Yishalmi would say it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, that seems to be the position of the Bavli. Yeah? But the Yishalmi doesn't say what's right. It says Ein Meraktin, Ein Mesafkin, right? All of this, Shema Yisakin, Kli Shiur. So l'chayr,
we do dance.
that's beyond the scope of this particular Shiur. But we're one controversy at a time, you know? Oh, I'm not going there right now.
Because Rashi says over there it's Berego. Why would you have to say repeat it as Berego? Of course it's Berego.
So,
Tap dancing.
you can't tap dance?
That's the Mishnah. That's the Mishnah. So the Yishalmi seem to hold that there's an Isser Doiraisa to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Comes the Bavli. The Bavli says, Minani Mili. Amar Rabbi Levi Bar Lachma. Rabbi Levi Bar Lachma says, Amar Rabbi Chami Bar Chanina. Now I believe that this Levi quoted in the Bavli is the same Levi as in the Yishalmi. It's the same person and it's the same drasha. One pasuk says Shabbos in Zichron Shua, and one pasuk says Yoim Trua Yelachem. Loi Kasha Kan b'Yom Tov Shechali Yos b'Shabbos, Kan b'Yom Tov Shechali Yos b'Chal. So far, exactly the same as the Yishalmi, except for Rabbi has two questions that blow Rabbi Levi out of the waters. Number one, if there is an Isser D'Oraisa, why do you blow in the Mikdash? And Rava does not feel that the answer of the Yishalmi gave from the Rashbi is a good answer, that in the Mikdash they knew exactly when Rosh Hashanah is, and it says V'hikravtem, the Bavli doesn't buy that. The Bavli continues, V'oid halav malacha here. There's no malacha in blowing the shofar. The Gemara says, Tekias shofar chachma ve'ena malacha. It's a skill, but it's not a labor. And since there's no Isser D'Oraisa in blowing the shofar, how could it be that Zichroin Trua says, don't blow the shofar on Shabbos? What's the malacha? And therefore Rava dismisses, presumably, the argument of the Yishalmi, and Rava says the famous line, Rava says, Midairaisa, you're allowed to blow the shofar. And the Rabbanon were geyser. Which Rabbanon? Rabba. By the way, which Rabba? Rabba Bar Nachmani. Rabba Bar Nachmani was the one who instituted this. And Rabba said, Hakol chayovim b'tkiyah shofar, everybody got to blow the shofar. Ve'en hakol b'kiyim b'tkiyah shofar, but most people don't know how to do it. Gzeira shema yelenu biyada, we're afraid you might take it in your hand, v'yelech etzel habaki, le'lilmoi, to learn, and you're going to carry it, dalat amos b'shus harabim, that's why you don't take lulav, and that's why you don't lay in the Megillah on Shabbos. The Bavli rejects the Yishalmi. The Yishalmi says you don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, that comes out on Shabbos Midairaisa. The Bavli says, what are you talking about, Doiraisa? Then you should blow in the Mikdash, and what's the Doiraisa? And therefore the Bavli says, it's a Gzera, D'Rabbanan, that we're afraid you're going to carry. So then why are we not Geyser in the Beis HaMikdash? We're going to get to that very soon. Comes the Torah, and the Torah says that he heard from Rav Shmuel Bar Chafni that if Rosh Hashanah comes out on the weekday, you say Yom Trua, but if it comes out on Shabbos, you say Zichroin Trua Mikra Kodesh B'chei Noyagin B'Ashkenaz. The minhag is we say Zichroin Trua. Is that like Bavli or Yishalmi? No? Yishalmi. Would the Bavli say you say Zichroin Trua? Presumably not. The Bavli rejected that. So it seems like our Nusach HaTfilah is siding with the Yishalmi. Comes the Beis Yosef, not at all. That the Rosh says, and the Masechta Sofrim says, say Zichroin Trua. You know why? Because once the Rabbanon made a Gzeira, the Asmachta is Zichron Shruah. It's not a doiraisa that you don't blow, but the Gzeira, the Rabbanon, is alluded to in the Pasuk. Grada, I saw this week, Rabbi Yosef Engel says that the Gzeira of Shema Yavirenu Daled Amos was as early as the time that Moses came down from Sinai and gave us the tablets. The first year already. When the Torah was given, there was already Gzeira D'Rabbanan not to blow on Shabbos. And that's how you could have a Gzeira D'Rabbanan Merumas in the Pasuk. That's Rabbi Yosef Engel, Masechta Rosh Hashanah, Chav Testament Aleph.
It doesn't say anywhere so far. It says Yom Teruah. It doesn't say anywhere Yom Zichron Teruah. It always says just Zichron.
Is there a machzor here? I don't remember offhand.
I heard it.
You heard a zach? Okay, fine. So the Beis Yosef is of the opinion that we still maintain the gersa of Zichron Shruah. However, where are you going? Something I said? That you still maintain the gersa of Zichron Shruah, but nevertheless, that does not prove that the Yerushalmi is right. Even if it's Gzeira D'Rabbanan, it could still be fit into Zichron Shruah. Now the question is, two questions. What does it mean that we blow in the Mikdash and not the Medina? Is Mikdash the Beis HaMikdash? Is Mikdash Yerushalayim? Is Mikdash Eretz Yisrael? And why were they not goyzer in the Mikdash? Comes Rashi, they were not goyzer in the Mikdash. Uve Mikdash loy gozer de ein shvus b'Mikdash. Ein shvus b'Mikdash. Say hello.
All my fans.
Yom?
It says it's B'choil Yom Teruah B'Shabbos Zichron.
Okay, good. So you said most machzarim say Yom.
It's a mistake.
Yeah. That's the art scroll.
Another
Another advantage of art scroll. Okay. Okay, so why are we not going to the Mikdash? Rashi says, Ein Isser Shvus b'Mikdash. Comes the Rambam says slightly different. Why are we not goyzer in the Beis HaMikdash? The Rambam says, when they were goyzer not to blow on Shabbos, they were never goyzer not to blow in the Beis HaMikdash, only in a place where there's no Bezdin. But when the Beis HaMikdash stood, there was a Bezdin Agadol b'Yushalayim, and everyone blew in Yerushalayim because everyone was under the auspices of the Bezdin, and when you're under the auspices of the Bezdin, you're not going to carry. Now listen carefully, because the Rambam is saying the reason they were not goyzer is because you're in front of Bezdin, you're not going to carry in front of Bezdin. According to that, the Rambam expands that when the Mishnah says they were not goyzer in the Mikdash, the Rambam holds Mikdash means the entire Yerushalayim. Rashi, look at number 8, says, Loi b'Medina, Loi b'Yerushalayim, Loi b'Gvulin. Medina means the whole Yerushalayim, Mikdash means the Mikdash proper. Okay, very important machlokes. According to Rashi, they were not goyzer in the Mikdash proper, they were goyzer in Yerushalayim. According to the Rambam, they were not goyzer in the entirety of Yerushalayim. I would suggest, I think it's very pashut, that Rashi and the Rambam are l'shitase. Rashi learns the reason they weren't goyzer in the Mikdash is because they ain't shvus b'Mikdash. So therefore Rashi learns ain't shvus b'Mikdash is the Mikdash mamish. Not the whole Yerushalayim. There's no din ein shvus b'Yerushalayim. The Rambam learns they weren't goyzer because you're under the auspices of Bezdin. Bezdin occupies the whole Yerushalayim. And therefore the Rambam learns they were never goyzer in the whole Yerushalayim. What? Therefore? Oh, well, it's not so pashut because there were gates. But the gates were locked at night, which is a major factor in upcoming controversy. Now, accordingly, there's a major historical machlokes. When the Beis HaMikdash stood, according to Rashi, they blew in the Mikdash and not in Yerushalayim, and according to the Rambam, they blew in Yerushalayim. It may come out another nafkamina. When the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, according to Rashi, you can't blow anywhere because there is no Mikdash, and you're never allowed to blow in Yerushalayim, and according to the Rambam, L'chayra, if there's a Bezdin in Yerushalayim, you could blow in Yerushalayim because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was masakin to blow wherever there's a Bezdin. So that's not everybody's going to agree with that supposition that it's dafka bezdin. We're not clear. Actually, Rashi is of the opinion you need a bezdin of 23. But that's another opinion of Rashi. So let's see. Let us see. Comes the Rif. And the Rif codifies this Gemara lahalacha, which raises the ire of the Baal Hamar. Why would the Rif quote this Gemara? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was masakin when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. You could blow wherever there's a bezdin. Now, most Rishonim learn what's the definition of a bezdin. Listen to this. You have to have smicha. Now, what does smicha mean? You went to some Beis Medrash and you learned a few simanim in the end of your day, and they tested you. Are you allowed to eat milk and meat together? Oh no, okay. V'samachas yadai aroisha, whatever, right? That's your smicha. So that's not real smicha. What halachic credibility does smicha today have? None. Doesn't mean anything. Smicha doesn't have any halachic reality. But back in the day, there was a real genuine smicha from Moshe Rabbeinu. In order to be a member of Sanhedrin, you had to trace your smicha back from someone who had smicha, back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Otherwise, you cannot give malchus or you cannot give capital punishment. We learned about a famous controversy in the 16th century by the Rabbi of the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yaakov Barav, who wanted to reinstitute smicha based on the Rambam and the Perush HaMishnayos in order to be able to give malchus, in order for the exilees of the Spanish Inquisition who felt that they were chayiv kares to get malchus and assuage their guilt. That was a major, and in fact he did reinstitute smicha, and he gave smicha to the Beis Yosef and the Mabit and the Alshich, and then it sort of stopped. But if you don't have real smicha, you can't be a member of the Sanhedrin. So the Baal Hamar wants to know, why would the Rif codify la halacha, this Gemara, that wherever there's a bezdin you could blow the shofar on Shabbos? It's not relevant because nobody has smicha anymore. And if you don't have smicha, l'chayra, you need a real bezdin, a bezdin that has smicha. So why is the Rif codifying this la halacha? Says the Baal Hamar, this is one of the rare instances where the Rif writes something which is incomprehensible. The Baal Hamar writes, in number 9 on the second page, this is one of the astounding things the Rif writes that we can't understand. We know the Rif only codifies what's relevant l'maisa. Why is this halacha relevant l'maisa? Our batei dinim bizman hazeh don't have the credibility of a Sanhedrin or a Bezdin Samach. But comes the Rosh, and the Rosh says, even though Rashi says you need a Bezdin of Chav Gimel, which Mati, Chav Gimel is Sanhedrin Ketana. So Rashi is of opinion, like you said, you need a Sanhedrin, at least a Sanhedrin Ketana. Amru alav Arav Alfish, Shahaya Toikea B'Rosh Hashanah, Shechal Liyos B'Shabbos. You know why the Rif codified el halacha? Because the Rif blew shofar on Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos.
Without a bezdin?
Yeah, with a bezdin. You know who the Av bezdin was? Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, the Rif. The Rif held he was the great bezdin. I assume this means in Fez, in Morocco. Grada was in the Rif Shul. In Morocco. And the Rif paskened that you blow the shofar on Shabbos. Why? Because the Rif holds, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was masakin, wherever there's a credible bezdin, you blow. You don't have to have smicha. You blow on Shabbos. And it's mashma, the Rif held this way, that's why the Rif codifies this Gemara halacha. V'hu hayamafarish kol malkam sheyesh by bezdin, lav davka Sanhedrin. Ela bezdin muflug v'gadav adora, the most prestigious bezdin. However, says the Rosh, v'lei nagu talmid of achrav lasses kain, the Rif's talmidim did not follow suit. The Ritva also quotes Rishonim that said that you blow shofar from Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, but the Ritva says it's not correct, and we never found any credible person who did this. But the Sefer HaChinuch says the Rif did it, and then he turns to his Talmidim and he says, some say you could, some say you can't, do whatever you want. So the Sefer HaChinuch seems to hold it's legitimate if you want to follow the Rif. You know, why not? We'll get some rugs, we'll hang them on the ceiling, and we'll get a nice Moroccan theme going. We'll get a dome, we'll get an archway coming into the shul with tiles, different color tiles, especially purple, and we'll get it going.
The criterion is just any base.
A chashav bezdin. I mean, the lashon is muflug v'gadol b'doyroi. So it doesn't sound like any Bezdin, but the Rif did it. Mar Rabbi said, but how do we paskin? Lamaisa, how do we paskin? There's something called the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch writes, Archaim Siman Tavkov Peches, if hey, Yom Tov Shorosh Hashanah Shechal Yos B'Shabbos Ein Toikim B'Shofar. So you'd say that's the end of the Shiur. And that could have been the end of the Shiur. But then, Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe Hashem gave Klal Yisrael people of great spirit. And in the year 1881, one of the interesting and great personalities of the end of the 19th century, a man by the name of Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger, Talmud Muvak of the Kisav Sofer, someone who sat on the lap of the Chasam Sofer until he's 2 years old, and son-in-law of the great Goin and Kanoi, Rav Hillel Kalamaya. So I brought in a resident expert on this sugya. Rav Mati Gottman is a direct descendant of Rav Hillel Kalamaya. And I have to say, the last time I was in the shul on Purim, that's basically the last time I was here, right after Megillah, Mati gave me the Leifa Ivri of Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. And I had been interested in him slightly even before that. But once this subject came up for Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos, you can't let the year go by without going through this great controversy of Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. Just to give you a little bit of a background who we're talking about, he was an independent soul, which means he did not toe the party line. He was somewhat of a strong-willed, independent spirit, and not afraid to speak up for what he believed was Ratzon Hashem. For instance, he was a great defendant of Radziner Tekias, and he had an antagonist who ripped it off him, burned it in fire, and accused him of being a Oved Avodah Zarah. He claimed that Tekias was Avodah Zarah. And in fact, I got some of this information from an article called Shofar on Shabbos and the Burning of Tzitzis in Jerusalem. I don't know what one has to do with the other, but they ripped off his tzitzis and they publicly burned it, and they accused the practice of Radziner Tekias of paganism. We were discussing today, Rav Schlesinger opposed the kollel system. Now, kollel did not mean what we refer to kollel. We refer to kollel as somebody who gets married and he sits and he learns, and he's supported by the great Shofar, right? And that's not what we're talking about. The kollel system was when people could not afford to support themselves. They were supported by the kuppah, and basically, let's put it this way: Rabbi Akiva Schlesinger was a good Republican. He did not believe in government handouts. He was a conservative, and he believed people had to work for their money. And he did not want Charedim to become dependent on the system. And that was also controversial, which is probably the main reason why there was a period in time that his books were banned. Another opinion of his was he was not supportive of, to some degree, Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon. That was also... so we're talking about somebody who wrote the Leifa Ivri. He grew up in the climate where, the famous motto of the Chasam Sofer is what? Chadash, Asur, Min HaTorah. This was not invented by the Chasam Sofer. This was popularized by Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. So he comes to Eretz Yisrael, and he set up school systems where he was a great believer in the establishment of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, that it should be a country run on halacha and agriculture. He believed people should work the land.
He was in the early 1800s?
He was in the end of the 19th century, so we're talking 1881. And this controversy raged until about the year 1905, 1906. He was a Charedish Yid. Avada. He wasn't a Talmud of Chasam Sofer. He was a Talmud of the Kisav Sofer. And he sat on the Chasam Sofer's lap. Well, Chasam Sofer was nifter what year? 1837?
Yes.
1837. So he sat on the Chasam Sofer's lap. Okay. Lamaisa, he was Ma'orer, many of the Chachmei Yerushalayim, that in fact, why wouldn't we blow the shofar in Yerushalayim on Shabbos? Number one, the Rif Paskins, you don't need smicha. Number two, the Rif Paskins, all you need is a Bezdin. So according to the Rif, we could blow. According to the Rambam, you could also blow in Yerushalayim. So were also good according to the Rambam. And in the year 1881, he published, 1885, he published 15 reasons why he believed that they're mechuyev to blow shofar on Shabbos in Yerushalayim. And this was published later in a journal in Hungary, Tekias, in the year 1904-1905. Fine, so what happened? He created a great stir. And of course, anyone who's ever involved in politics would know that if you want to get Rabbanim to support you, that may be very easy. But when it comes down to it, lemaisa, at the big show, sometimes it's possible that they may become a little hesitant. And that's what happened to Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. He had 23 Go'enei Olam sign up to participate in the Bezdin, to blow the shofar in Shabbos on, I believe, the year 1881. In fact, according to the article Shofar on Shabbos and the burning of the tzitzis in Jerusalem, now most of this information has been recorded by a great Goin, Rabbi Chiel Michal Tikachinsky. Rabbi Chiel Michal Tikachinsky was one of the great Goinim in the times of the Chazon Ish, who had a daya about the international dateline. Rabbi Chiel Michal Tikachinsky wrote the most important sefer written on Hilchos Avelos called Gesher HaChaim. He also wrote what is known as Luach Eretz Yisrael, which records until today the Minhagim of Eretz Yisrael. And he, what? It could be it's a little bit of an early Zman. And he argued with Chazon Ish about the international dateline. He wrote many volumes of Svarim. He wrote something called Gesher HaChaim. He also wrote Ir HaKodesh VeHaMikdash, all in Yanim of Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash. And in Ir HaKodesh VeHaMikdash, he records the whole controversy of who he calls a great Rav and a Goin, Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. So he says like this. He gathers 23 rabbis. Now, according to this article, Shofar on Shabbos, by the way, written by Ari Zivotofsky and Ari Greenspan. It's an Ari and Ari production, but this was from, I believe, 2006. They write that he actually convened two bezdins, a bezdin of Ashkenazim or a bezdin of Sfardim. Because what if Mashiach comes and says, the Sfardim are the real thing, and they get rid of the Ashkenazic bezdin. So then he has a Sfardic bezdin. If Mashiach comes and says, no Sfardim, then we have an Ashkenazic bezdin. Those were the two kinds of bezdins he got, just in case. Okay. He covered all his bases, as we're about to see. And as he was about to blow, he turns around and the 23 Rabbanim were like 2.5. Where they went, when they slipped out, we don't know, but clearly they were afraid that this would be a breach of protocol. So maybe ideally they believed that the shofar should be blown, but it seems like they were hesitant to show their support. Lamaisa, says Rabbi Chiel Michal Tikachinsky, I just missed an opportunity to ask the greatest Goin in Yerushalayim of the time, who was that, Rav Shmuel Salant, who was already on his deathbed. You know the famous story of Shmuel Salant, who was very old. He summoned the Aderes to come to Yerushalayim to take him over. The Aderes was much younger, and I believe it turned out the Shmuel Salant, he outlived the Aderes. Okay, be it as it may, Rabbi Chiel Michal Tikachinsky says, I never asked Rabbi Shmuel Salant. However, I heard from an Eid Neman, namely Rabbi Elio Mordechai Eisenstein. You know him? No. Famous person. Very famous. Rabbi Elio Mordechai Eisenstein. He was the secretary of Shmuel Salant. He said that Rabbi Shmuel Salant said that he would never tell anyone that they're allowed to blow shofar on Shabbos that comes out on Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, but he would never stop anyone who wanted to blow the shofar. So that was like some kind of quasi form of some backhanded haskama that we're not going to say yes, but we're not going to say no. That is up to debate. Whether it actually happened, it is unclear whether Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger actually blew the shofar in front of 2.5 people. Because those 2.5 Rabbanim, we don't know who they are. So who exactly was made that he blew the shofar? Yeah. That we don't know. There's a controversy. Did he actually blow? For the purpose of this shiur, yes, we're coming out definitively that he might have blown.
Right, I'm just saying, it's not just the 2.5.
Ask Mati, I don't know. I wasn't there. What? We don't know. But listen to this. Says Rabbi Chiel Michal Tikachinsky, I came to Rabbi Shmuel Salant in 1905 with the new calendar for the year 1905. And in it said that Rosh Hashanah, you know how in the calendar, Tishrei of the next year is like in small print on the back page? Yeah. So Shmuel Salant looks on the calendar, he says, Oivai, next year Rosh Hashanah Shabbos. That means the next time I'm going to blow shofar midaraisa is in 2 years. He didn't feel he'll be able to survive the 2 years. He said, Oivai, I hope Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger is going to blow shofar this year on Shabbos, because if he does, I'm going to come and listen behind a wall so that nobody sees me. This way I'll be Mekayim Shofar D'Oraisa, but nobody will say I gave him a heter to blow. Okay? So again, it seems like now, Reb Schlesinger claimed that he had 2 haskamas for his procedure. Number 1, the Adaras, Rabbi Yoel David Rabinowitz Tu'umim, the father-in-law of Kook, and Rabbi Avram Shag. Who's Rabbi Avram Shag? Talmud Muvak of Kesav Sefer. He was, what?
What was the name of his town?
I don't remember. He learned in Pressburg, and then he came to Eretz Yisrael in the times of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Zonnefeld. Okay. So bottom line is, Rabbi Isai, let's try to learn some of the arguments that Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger used to try to institute the blowing of shofar and Rosh Hashanah that came out on Shabbos. We're going to go through, very briefly, 13 steps with which he argued that we are mechuyev to blow the shofar this year on Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos. Now, if we're going to follow him, then maybe we should all go to Eretz Yisrael. Lots of luck getting there, and go to Yerushalayim and convene a bezdin. Bari, you know any av bezdin you could take care of this? They're in quarantine, all the better. And maybe we should blow the shofar. Number 1, he says like this.
They're following the Rif. That's what they're doing.
Now it's based on the Rif that you don't need a bezdin of smuchim. You could have a bezdin of rabbis. It's based on the Rif, but it goes beyond the Rif. You know why? Because we don't paskin like the Rif. The Rif holds you need a bezdin of smuchim, but most Rishonim, the Rif holds you don't need a bezdin of smuchim, but most Rishonim say you do need a bezdin of smuchim. So number 1, the Rif.
That's the main thing.
Number 1, the Rif says you don't need a real Sanhedrin. Yeah. Number 2, the Gemara in Shabbos says if Tsar Balei Chaim is D'Oraisa, you could take a kli and be mevatel it from its preparatory state. Are you allowed to be mevatel kli mehechanei on Shabbos? It's an Isser D'Rabbanan, says the Gemara. If Tsar Balei Chaim is D'Oraisa pushes off a D'Rabbanan. Says Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger, I don't care if you might carry. Tekias Shofar is a D'Oraisa. D'Oraisa is more important than D'Rabbanan. Huh? Yeah, but what about the Gemara? The Gemara says you don't blow a shofar because you might come to carry. No! But other Gemaras say that D'Oraisa is more important than D'Rabbanan. That's step 1. Step 2. What's more important? Asay D'Rabim or a Isser D'Oraisa? We know there's a concept, Asay D'Rabim, pushes off. Isser D'Oraisa, that's why you're allowed to free an Eved Kanani to make a minyan, because Asay D'Rabim pushes off an Isser D'Oraisa freeing an Eved. So we see in Asay D'Rabim, D'Rabbanan could push off a D'Oraisa. So certainly Shofar, which is an Asay D'Oraisa D'Rabim, should push off a D'Rabbanan. Says Rabbi Akiva Yosef, very pashut. A D'Rabbanan D'Rabim pushes off an Isser D'Oraisa. Kal v'chomer D'Oraisa D'Rabim pushes off a D'Rabbanan. So therefore, we would take Rabbah and we'd say, Rabbah, what are you talking about? How could you push off the D'Oraisa of Shofar in light of a D'Rabbanan unless you come to carry? D'Oraisa pushes off D'Rabbanan. Certainly I say the Rabbin pushes off D'Rabbanan.
Is this parallel for Luv and Esther as well?
Yeah, I'm not up to that yet. Yeah. In other words, Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger is arguing on a Gemara. So he said, but you can't argue on a Gemara. Wait a second. He says it must be that when Rabbah made a gezerah, he would never abolish the blowing of the shofar throughout Klal Yisrael. He only did it in limited circumstances. Where's that? Where we're worried you might carry. But he certainly didn't do it in Yerushalayim, because never would Rabbah have the audacity to take a D'Rabbanan and use a D'Rabbanan to trump a D'Oraisa when we know that D'Oraisa trumps D'Rabbanan, especially a mitzvah D'Rabim trumps a mitzvah D'Yachid. Elamai, Rabbi assered specific cases. He assered blowing in the 5 towns, Williamsburg, Muncie, Flatbush, and Lakewood. But Avada and Avada, he didn't mavatal it everywhere. He kept it in Yerushalayim. One second. The Chachomim have the koyach to ma'aker dover min Torah. You're right. That's when we know they did. But what if we're not sure if they were Oiker Davar Min HaTorah? For example, Yerushalayim today, we're just not sure. Maybe the Rif is right, that you could blow Shofar on Shabbos in any Bezdin. Maybe the Rambam is right, you could still blow in Yerushalayim. Maybe it could be in any Bezdin. So who gets the benefit of the doubt? In other words, should you err on the side of caution to blow? Or should you err on the side of caution, well, maybe someone's going to carry? Says Rabbi Schlesinger, why in the world would you err on the side of caution? Oh, maybe someone's going to carry. That's a D'Rabbanan of a Yachid. Better err on the side of caution. Blow, that's a D'Oraisa of a Rabbim. So we don't know what to do in Yerushalayim. Avada and Avada. Safek D'Oraisa l'chumra. You need to blow, 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 blow. Now this is Gavaldik. I don't know why I never thought of this. Question. Bizman Hazeh, Sukkot is going to come out on Shabbos, no? Do you take the lulav on Shabbos? No. How about in Yerushalayim? In front of the Bezdin Hagadol.
They took it in the base of Mikdash.
Not on Shabbos.
Yes, they did, no?
Nope. No. No, they didn't. They took it in the Mikdash on Shabbos?
I think so, yes. I think that's what it said. Yes.
No.
So that's the Eraisa the whole 7 days in the Mikdash, as opposed to everywhere else.
Yeah, in the Mikdash they didn't take it on the first day. That's what the Ran is assuming. Ask the Ran, listen to the Ran's kasha. Why lulav after the Churban? We don't take it on Shabbos. And shofar we do. Says the Ran, because the lulav, the rabbis don't like to be mevatel mitzvahs. So lulav, they're not being mevatel. You'll take it on day 2 or day 3 or day 4 or day 5. But Rosh Hashanah is only 1 day. And if they're going to be mevatel it, they're going to lose out on the great zechus of the shofar. Furthermore, the Ran says, shofar is more important than lulav. The only way to get your merits sent to Shamayim is the shofar. Therefore, they only were mevatel shofar on Shabbos outside of the Mikdash. In the Mikdash you blow, but you don't take the lulav. Because you can take it on a different day, but you can't blow the shofar on a different day. What?
You can't blow Rosh Hashanah?
Isn't Rosh Hashanah 2 days in Israel?
No, in the Mikdash. If you don't blow it on day 1, you're not going to blow it at all. So in the Mikdash they allowed you to blow. Masha'inkin, there's not D'Oraisa, and they didn't always keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael. And certainly not in Yerushalayim. So therefore the Ran says, shofar they cannot be mevatel in the Mikdash. The rabbis don't have the koyach to be mevatel shofar mikoil v'chol, because the rabbis would never get rid of such a precious mitzvah. So says Rabbi Akiva Yosef, that bizman hazeh, what's the nafkamina? We have a Bezdin, we have Yerushalayim, and if we don't blow, then it's going to come out the rabbis were mevatel the mitzvah of shofar, and they don't have the koyach to do that. Rabbi would never do that. They would get rid of lulav because you could do it on a different day, but they would never get rid of shofar. The rabbis would never make it that there's a place, that there's nowhere in the world where the shofar is not blown. Then Klal Yisrael would be doomed. Furthermore, do you remember the Shiur on the Taz HaYadua? Where the Taz says that even though the Chachamim could say, don't be Mekayim a mitzvah, but not if the Torah says explicitly to be Mekayim it. For example, if anybody here born on Shabbos? Bris Milah on Shabbos, right? Yes. I bris on Shabbos. Why don't we geyser? Maybe you'll carry the baby, maybe you'll carry the knife, maybe you'll carry the cookies that say the baby's name on it. It's a big shaila. You're allowed to put the baby's name on the cookies before you give the name. That's one of the biggest shilas people have. Right? Why aren't we geyser? Because the Torah says do milah on Shabbos. And the Chachamim don't have the capacity to be oiker davar min Torah when the Torah says explicitly. Says the Shar HaMelech, The Torah says explicitly, blow the shofar on Shabbos. Yom Trua means afilu b'Shabbos. Just like Uviyam Hashmini Yimal B'Sar Alasa means even on Shabbos. And therefore, says Rabbi Akiva Yosef, Rabbi does not have the koyach to mevatel shofar in the Beis HaMikdash. Then he says a major chiddush. He says everybody agrees to the rif. You don't need smuchim. The Rambam says you need smuchim. Don't get confused with the facts, What the Rambam means is, because anyway, the Rambam says different things. So Rabbi Akiva Yosef learns the Rambam. The Rambam holds you need to get the highest caliber bezdin that's available in your time. So that used to be Yavne, and not Yavne, any bezdin that can be Mekadesh the Chodesh. And if you can't get that, you need bezdin Muflag. And Bezman Hazeh, you take what you have. Even the Rambam would agree you could be blow the shofar on Shabbos Bezman Hazeh. Next, are you allowed to take a towel and squeeze yourself, wipe yourself down on Shabbos? Also, I don't want to hear what people do. It's a Mishnah. You're not allowed to do it. Okay? Can't do it. What about could 10 people take one big towel? Putting aside the personal and other dimensions of this practice, can 10 people wipe themselves out with a towel? The Mishnah says, yeah, because Rabbi Madkari Hadadi, when a lot of people are doing it, they remind each other. Says Rabbi Akiva Yosef, I want to be masakin, to blow in front of a lot of people. In front of a lot of people, no one's going to carry. I mean, every time you blow shofar. That's his argument. Next. I'm up to Tess. He says something fantastic. B'chlal, the gzeiras you might carry, where might you carry? In a Rishus Harabim. Could somebody tell me where there's a Rishus Harabim B'zman hazeh? In Cedarhurst there are no Rishus Harabims. In Woodmere there are no Rishus Harabims. I don't even know what the 5 towns are. Lawrence there are no Rishus Harabims.
Red Square.
Right? Where exactly are the Rishus Harabims?
Ocean Parkway, no?
Queens, Kew Garden Hills are much not a Rishus Harabim. Where exactly is the Rishus Harabim? There's maybe Ocean Parkway. Yerushalayim's not a Rishus Harabim. So they were never geyser. Rabba was never geyser in Yerushalayim. Elamah, you want to say he was? That's before they started locking the gates at night. But now that they lock the gates at night, Rabba's Gzeira doesn't apply to Yerushalayim. You want to say you need a real Bezdin? So we gathered 23 of the biggest Talmid Chachamim. So we have a real Bezdin. You want Ashkenazim? We'll have Ashkenazim and Sfardim. This is my favorite one. Now this one, Rabbi Chil Michal Tikachinsky does not record all the details, but according to this article, Shofar on Shabbos, this was in the year 1904, 1905. There was great tragedy for Russian Jewry. There were great pogroms. What's the halacha when there's Jewish tragedy? Are you allowed to blow horns on Shabbos to alarm people to pray? Yes. So Rabbi Akiva Yosef came to Rav Shmuel Salant. He says, forget the shofar. We're blowing it. Let's say I'm not doing a mitzvah. But what about Russian Jewry? We need to sound the alarms to alert people to pray for Russian Jewry. The Gemara says that you can't blow shofaros on Shabbos because Shema Yavirenu. But to that, the Smag says that if you're in a time when they know exactly the Kviya Diyarcha, we're not goyzer that gzeira on the Chatzoitzros. So says Rabbi Akiva Yosef, in case we shouldn't be blowing the shofar, let it be a blowing midin Chatzoitzros.
Chatzoitzros are a different mitzvah for people. We know chatzoitzros.
You mean trumpets?
Trumpets, they're not shofars.
It sounds like, as long as you make a noise with a horn, that could constitute some kind of blowing of Chatzoitzros. Next, there's an incredible smag. The smag says, what's the chashash you might carry the shofar? The smag says, I don't know how he reads into the Gemara, when are you going to carry? Not before you blew the shofar. Because if you're involved in doing the mitzvah, you're not going to carry. We're afraid after you blew, then you're going to take it and carry it. Now, I don't know, I thought the whole thing is you don't know how to blow, so you're going to ask someone how to blow. That's how the smag learns. The chashash is you might carry it after. Says Rabbi Akiva Yosef, we're going to appoint dayanim We're going to refund the police, make them policemen, and as soon as the blowing is over, it's going to be under their auspices so that no one could touch the shofar. Some suggest that they would cement it into the wall so there's no gezerah shema yavirenu. Next, and here's the final argument. You're now to blow shofar. Why? Shema yavirenu da'at amos. Who gets the avera? The listeners or the blower? The blower. Do the listeners who attend the blowing get an avera? No. So they're doing a mitzvah d'oraisa. He's doing a isser d'Rabbanan. Doesn't the Gemara say in Shabbos? Mutav sheyase isser kal v'al tavei chavercha l'isser chamor. Sometimes it's kedai to do a small avera so your friend doesn't do a big avera. And sometimes it's kedai to do a small avera so that your friend gets a big zechus. So all the hundreds of people who are going to come listen to the shofar, they get a big mitzvah. Me, who I'm going to blow the shofar, I'll get a small avera. It's kedai for me to get a small avera and save these people from having a Rosh Hashanah without Tekias. And based on these 13 reasons, now, he says that Tosfos' shita in Shabbos on Daf Daled is that if the person was not poisheya, it's better to do an isser kal. Now, I honestly don't understand that because that's oiker the hogzer of Rabbi. I mean, well, we could get one avarian in every shul. I'm sure somebody would volunteer to be the avarian, and we follow Tosfos that it's kedai to do the avera so that everyone else gets it. But Rabbi said we don't go for that. These were the 13 arguments of Rabbi Akiva, Yosef, Schlesinger, and the Rabbanan did not accept it b'chlal, and here's the main reason. That Rabbi Akiva, Yosef, Schlesinger was not the first Gadol b'Yisrael who lived in Yerushalayim. So you say, oh yeah, of course, hundreds. No, actually, I don't even think you could count it on a hand. The number of Gedolim that lived in Yerushalayim from the times of the Rishonim until the end of the 19th century. It wasn't accessible. Who lived in Yerushalayim? The Ramban? And then who? Nobody else had access. We had two. Pri Chadash. I was zoichet to be at the kever of the Pri Chadash. He is buried on the foot of Har HaZeisim. The Chidah says about the Pri Chadash, Ashrei Chelkai. Why? Because he had the most prestigious Rabbanus of his time, which was Amsterdam. But the people told him, we will keep you as long as you don't tell us what to do. And he said, and the Chidah records for posterity, Ashra va'ashrei chelkai. That's the Pri Chadash. Who else was in Yerushalayim? Chidah writes it in the Shem HaGdolim. The Chidah writes about it in the Magal Tov. Who else was in Yerushalayim? The Marid Al-Ghazi. The Pri Chadash was a reputable rabbi. The Marid Al-Ghazi was a reputable rabbi. They did not say to blow shofar on Shabbos. They did not say to blow shofar. So who are we to come 500 years later? Now that's always a question because then you can never change anything.
But at their time, they could convene the
So again, we don't know. Maybe Akiva Yosef would say they didn't have 23, they didn't have 3, they didn't have a Bezdin,
They weren't Ashkenazim.
they weren't Ashkenazim, who knows? They didn't learn in Pressburg, who knows what the...
3 Chodesh was an Ashkenazi.
Reb Chizkiyahu di Silva. Reb Chizkiyahu di Silva. I think he was an Ashkenazi though.
He wasn't Spanish Portuguese.
I'm not sure. Bottom line is, the Chachamim said as follows. They said, question, because Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger's main argument was, look, the Deraisa is more important than the Rabbanan. So the Deraisa of blowing shofar should push over the Issa Rabbanan. So he says something very interesting. He says, let me ask you something. Are you allowed to blow a shofar on Shabbos? Stam Azai. No, it's an Issa Rabbanan. You can't blow a musical instrument. So why do I need Gezerah D'Rabba? Why didn't the Gemara is searching, why don't you blow shofar on Shabbos? What do you mean? Rabbi Akiva, the Rabbanan said the same way Ein mesapkin, ein metapchim, ein merakdim. The same way you can clap your hands, stamp your feet, or dance, you can't blow a musical instrument. So why is the Gemara searching for a reason why you can't blow the shofar? You can't blow the shofar because you can't use a musical instrument. Apparently, listen to this, you can't compare Gzeras D'Rabbanan. Apparently that Gezerah D'Rabbanan is weaker, and if the Torah says blow the shofar, the D'Oraisa of blowing the shofar would push off the D'Rabbanan of not blowing a musical instrument on Shabbos. So Legabe, that kind of D'Rabbanan, Rabbi Akiva Yosef is right. The D'Oraisa will push off the D'Rabbanan. But apparently Rabba's D'Rabbanan is a stronger D'Rabbanan. All D'Rabbanans are different. Because apparently the D'Oraisa blowing the shofar would push off the Isser of blowing a musical instrument, but it would not push off the Isser of Shema Yavirenu, which teaches us that sometimes the Chachamim made a Gzeira, and they made it so strong that even though there is a mitzvah D'Oraisa, and a mitzvah D'Rabim, and a mitzvah that is Mala, the Zechuyos of Klal Yisrael, they said the buck stops here, and you still cannot blow the shofar. And that was, according to Rabbi Michal Tekias, the main reason they did not agree with him. Again, based on the Svara, that Rabba's Gezerah is so strong, it clearly pushes off a D'Oraisa, so don't try to hem and haw, maybe only here, maybe only over there. And Bez Hashem, tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, you can join us for how they respond to all 13 of the arguments of Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. But here's why his efforts and attempts is so important. Because at least it brought to the forefront that of the importance of wanting to blow the shofar on Shabbos, and realize that if we're not going to do it, Shabbos must be such an important principle that it's worthwhile to lose out on blowing the shofar, which is a D'Oraisa of the Rabbim, which is Maila, all the Zechuyos of Klal Yisrael, to avoid possibly violating one of the small minutiae of Shabbos. Okay, so this is part one of this wondrous story. Thank you everyone for coming. And Bracha v'atzlacha. We have Zoicha to get together, Baruch Hashem, for Shiurim Tavshin Pei. Yivon Hashem should give us Siyata D'Shmaya for another year. Gesundheit, Aksiv Chsimatayla.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.